This is Horsepower Heritage. I'm Maurice Merrick. Thanks for joining me once again, and this week I've got a special auction preview for you. It's almost Monterey Car Week time again, and my guest is Eric Minoff of Bonhams Cars. They've got a new venue for their Monterey auction at Laguna Seca Raceway. So we'll be talking about some of the offerings they have this year, some cool cars. And by the way, if you're attending Monterey Car Week, I want to let you know I'll be hosting a fireside chat at the Quail, a motorsports gathering. They're having me back over there. That's going to be really fun. And of course, I'll be around the peninsula all week. I've got some great interviews lined up. So if you're going to Car Week and you happen to see me, come say hello. Also, because this time of year is kind of hectic, I'm not sure when the next episode is going to drop. I might take a couple weeks off, but it'll be here when you're ready to listen. All right, that's all the housekeeping for this time. And here's my conversation with Eric Minoff of Bonhams Cars. Enjoy. Eric, before we get into the cars and everything, I have to ask you, how's your 911T? I know you recently celebrated kind of an anniversary with that car.
Yeah. How is it? Well, I actually this morning I took it in to have it serviced. I live in Texas, so this summer is our sort of winter months for the rest of the country in terms of driving. At least cars with no AC, which a 68 911 has no AC. So it's running great. It's, it doesn't overheat. It's just that the meat servo behind the wheel does. So looking forward to cooler months. We my friends and I here joke that we should plan a car tour where I live near the hill country, and there's a lot of swimming holes with all the rivers and stuff out here, of which people became unfortunately quite familiar last July when all that flooding happened tragically. But we were thinking of doing a car tour where we drive from one swimming hole to another swimming hole in our hot, unair-conditioned cars, and basically cool off at each stop. So,
wow, that's about as Texas as it gets.
Yeah, we have until maybe November to plan that when it'll cool off. So we have some time.
No, it sounds fun. It's definitely an original idea. Well, Eric, my friend, good to see you again. It's been too long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Always a pleasure.
And we're about to make the annual pilgrimage to Monterey. And Bonhams Cars has a great new venue, and I want to kind of start this off by talking about that. Pretty exciting.
Yeah, we're excited to be moving, honestly. We're moving to Laguna Seca. We're going to be at the track between turns 2 and 5, just a few steps away from the paddock. The auction's moving to Thursday, August the 13th, as opposed to our old slot on Friday. I mean, quite honestly, our old venue was lovely. We had a great run at it. The Quail is a wonderful event, but it's an event that I think most people want to spend more time at the event than anywhere else, which makes it, a tougher draw to get people away from canapes and the constant stream of new releases of vehicles. When Bonham started there in 1998, that was Concorso. The first Quail was in 2001, and it was a garden party. Tickets were very expensive at the time. They were $250.
Oh my word!
Oh my stars! They've gone up a bit since then, even outpacing the inflation of college education, and I think even outpacing the inflation of most modern Ferraris and whatnot.
I would venture to say that a Quail ticket these days might rival the GDP of certain microstates.
Yeah, it's not an inexpensive event, and in part because of that, folks are less inclined to leave. I don't blame them. If I were at the Quail, I probably wouldn't leave either. So we're quite happy to be at a different event on a quieter day. The Monterey Motorsports Reunion, with which Bonhams has had a relationship for about a decade and a half, sponsoring the pre-reunion with a presence there, and then also attending and being part of the reunion itself. It's the most highly attended event on the peninsula. It's a wonderful area that's, quite frankly, always sunny up there. And, it's where people are up to drive and enjoy vehicles. And you've got a lot of the best collectors and enthusiasts in the world are up there. And a lot of them also have a full team of mechanics if they want to have a closer look at the cars on offer.
Definitely. And the track offers something over many days versus the Quail, which is a one-day event. So people can still take advantage of watching vintage cars go round and round, but also slide into the auction and see what's on the block. So
True. It's also not accessible from a single 2-lane road with a narrow bridge that is turned off of another 2-lane road that is just narrowed. And on multiple occasions, I know people that had been stuck in over hour-long traffic jams trying to get out there.
it is crazy, and it seems to get crazier every year. So yeah, I think it's a good move for you guys. I'm excited about it. Now, at this point, we're recording this in July, of course, and this is a preview of your auction offerings for Monterey. There's a select few cars that we're going to talk about today, but of course, there will be more as we get closer to the event.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's more coming up every day as we process things, but we'll focus on some of the stars that I think folks will appreciate the most.
Hey guys, I want to take a quick break to say if you enjoy Horsepower Heritage, there are a few ways you can support the show. Go to buymeacoffee.com/HP Heritage and become a patron. There's a link in the show notes. You can make a one-time donation or you can support the show monthly. It's easy, and for the price of a latte, you can help me continue to bring you more of the people and stories behind the machines. You can also leave 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify because that helps new listeners discover the show. Thanks for your support, and now back to the show. All right, very good. Well, I'm going to give you the honors of starting us off. What's the first car you'd like to talk about?
Well, I mean, if we're going from the top in terms of probably wide interest and to some extent value, one of the stars is a Lamborghini Diablo GT that we're going to be offering. It's a 2000 Lamborghini Diablo GT. This, of course, was kind of the wildest version that was built. Lamborghini never really, in its history, ever pursued out-and-out motorsport as a business plan. Ferrari, obviously, race cars were funded by their road car business. Lamborghini's, for its entire history, has mostly been a road car business. But this was about as close to a homologation vehicle as one could imagine, albeit one that is obviously designed to be road legal. It had the 6-liter V12 in it. The body was almost entirely constructed out of carbon fiber. The interior was a bit stripped out. So they'd reduced weight by 70 kilograms, which is a pretty substantial amount. Rear-wheel drive, of course, and they only built 80 of these. This is number 74 of those 80. It's in Black Rage, that's the color, over Nero. So black. It's got about 14,300 kilometers on it from new, or at least registered on the odometer there, and it's got other unique features. It's got a very rare Lamborghini supplied leather briefcase, which I guess you can bring your track underwear in when you go to race it. But that's a car that today's collectors are really chasing, these sort of very limited production allocation cars, if you will. And Diablos generally have become more and more sought after. So the estimate on this car is going to be $2.1 to $2.6 million. And I imagine there'll be more than a few people that are chasing after the absolute pinnacle of the Diablo with the open Nissan 300ZX headlights.
You've been at this a long time, Eric. Are you surprised by the surge in value of this era of car, the 2000s? I mean, they're really taken off.
Yeah, I mean, my unscientific theory is, at the end of the day, the biggest driving force in car collecting has always been and will always be nostalgia collecting. People buy what they wanted when they were younger. Typically when they were 14 to 20 years old is where you form your most intense desires for both vehicles and also, quite honestly, media. The music we think is the best music ever made is always the music we listened to when we were in high school.
It's true.
And maybe college. So it's not surprising that we also want the cars that were in those music videos. There's been a slight shortening in the amount of time it's taken for cars to become sort of super collectible. It used to take about 35 years, and now it's obviously taking less. Quite frankly, when an allocation cars being when you can't go to the dealership and buy with money, you have to sort of be invited to have the privilege of plonking down a bunch of money to buy one, comes up for sale in the public market. Those are trading for very big values, and those were built yesterday. But the increases in value we've seen in stuff like F40s, F50s, 288 GTOs, these Lamborghini Diablos, the sort of hypercars of the Porsche era, the last generation 993 Turbo S's and turbos and GT2s, the 997 GT2 RS's and GT3 RS 4.0s and whatnot. Those have certainly become very in vogue. To some extent, they're collected by two different groups of people, though. You've got your group of drivers who are looking for cars with some amount of mileage, and those cars are pretty hard to find because, quite frankly, the people that are driving them are deriving enjoyment from them. And then the other group is, folks who are looking more for investment, and those are going to be the lower mileage cars, which pretty much never get driven. They have the potential to appreciate the most, but like a bottle of wine, the bottle of wine with the cork and the foil on it is certainly going to be worth the most amount of money. From an enjoyment perspective, it tastes better with the cork out of it. But one of the beauties of car collecting specifically is once you own the car, you are sort of free to do with it what you will. If you want to create a Robert Chamberlain and crushed it into a cube, like, it's your car, you do what you want, which is why modification is to some extent accepted. A Singer is not an original car by any means, but they're obviously widely accepted in the motoring hobby.
Well, and that brings up the whole idea of how, car culture is so finely divided. To be blunt about it, we could say there's an ass for every seat, right? But I love the resto mod culture that's been going on. Singer's a great example. Gunther Works is a great example. I'm not aware of too much in the Lamborghini world in that vein, but I'm sure they're out there.
There's a company that does Diablos, I think Evolution or something like that. There's a lot of reimagining right now. I think that to some extent, jump the shark or nuke the fridge or whatever term you want to use as far as reimagination goes. Obviously Singer is the first to really use that term to a great extent, but then you have reimagined Ford Broncos, Land Rover Defenders, and now you have reimagined Diablos, F355s. David Lee reimagined a Dino 246 GT. You can get a reimagined, it looks like an 037 Lancia.
Great example.
If you want to spend the money, you can reimagine anything. And, most of these cars have high six, in some cases low, sometimes not so low 7-figure prices. Pagani does swift business, effectively reimagining all of their Zondas into something else. And that's the factory effectively reimagining a C12 into something else.
Another example, Eric, that you just made me think of is the Lancia Aurelia B20 GT that was reimagined by Thornley Kellum as an outlaw with a chop top. And that's about the oldest, quote unquote, reimagined car I can think of at this point. But yeah,
well, Porsche's Porsche's the original outlaw with the 356.
That's true.
And taste change. Ultimately, this reimagination thing, it partly comes down to the reality that the cars that are being reimagined in actuality are not rare. Porsche 993 or 964 in the case of Singer, not an uncommon car. Tens of thousands were built. The Diablo, that's a relatively uncommon car, but you still got, over 1,000 options to choose from there. In most cases, they're reimagining things of which there are well over 1,000 examples or tens of thousands of examples that are out there. So if you take one and you restore it and don't restore it to dead nuts original, but instead use your imagination to make specific changes to sort of update it stylistically and mechanically. Again, it's your car, your money. You do what you want. No different than hot rodding, and that was started in the late 40s. American servicemen were hot rodding pre-war Fords and whatnot. So this is effectively the same thing, just with European cars and done with a lot more money and not typically done by the owner.
I was just going to say, hot rodders were probably the original reimagineers.
Oh, yeah.
All right, well, the Diablo GT was an excellent place to start, but I will bring us back to a more traditional offering that you guys have, which is the 1953 Mercedes-Benz 300S Coupe. I mean, this is the height of post-war luxury and prestige. Technologically, it's not going to knock your socks off, but it's built like a bank vault. It was the car of kings and celebrities, actors, and concert pianists. I mean, it is just dripping with elegance.
Yeah, they're pretty neat cars. I mean, they were more expensive. Obviously, this one predates the 300 SL, but they were produced at the same time as the 300 SL, and they cost quite a bit more than a 300 SL when new. And quite frankly, to restore, they cost more than a 300 SL to restore because they're so overbuilt. As a luxury car, they're fantastic. Similar motor to the 300 SL in terms of architecture, although the motor is straight up and down as opposed to at an angle. But they're really just phenomenal kind of luxury touring machines. This one comes from very long-term ownership, and as a coupe, it's really a comfortable all-weather kind of vehicle, and not often seen. The coupe's survival rate is lower than the cabriolets.
With a car like this, do you think the provenance is as important as other cars? I mean, to me, it's not, because the car sort of speaks for itself. There are certain cars where the provenance becomes a very important component of the value and of the desirability of the car. Rolls-Royce Silver Ghosts are in that category, I would say. Many Ferraris are in that category, not simply the competition cars, but even the road-going cars. But a Mercedes 300S is that's the statement right there.
Yeah, but on the same note, a car that's had exceptionally long-term single-family ownership is also one that typically has been unmessed with. It hasn't gone through the peaks and troughs of value that can affect how one keeps a car if it's effectively maintained by the same family that has an emotional connection to it. And also, they're not as concerned about how much they paid for it. Certainly less than what it's worth today, given how long they've owned it. But it does advance things to some degree. The other thing is, quite frankly, it's an opportunity to buy something that's been unavailable to the public market for an extremely long time. With a car like this, I would say there's always sort of three types of provenance. There's a helpful provenance, which is unique and interesting ownership and condition. There's not unhelpful, but not helpful provenance, which is just a series of owners and nothing particularly special happened. And there's unhelpful provenance, which is large gaps in the history that open questions as to what it actually is. This car has a very well-known history and has been well kept for its entire life. So it's a pretty special machine because of that. And I think they're a fabulous value. This car is going to be estimated at $2.25 to $3.25, 1/4 of what a 300 SL Roadster would sell for. Sure, it's not as sporty. It's not going to be as quick. But if you want to go on a comfortable tour, it's fantastic. And especially if your knees and body are not up to the task of the gymnastics required to get into and then extract yourself out of a 300 SL Coupe, this would still be an excellent thing to do something like the Copper State with, or a rally of that nature.
Good points all. I don't have any data to back this up, but my sense is that these cars rarely fell into a sad state. They didn't hit the used car market like some other cars did and just sort of go through a succession of maybe half-hearted owners and fall into neglect. By and large, been well cared for. I know that's a big generalization.
Yeah, they were very, very expensive when new. And they are not inexpensive to keep looking nice. You can think of it as sort of akin to a Bentley Azure or a Continental RRT, which is to say they were exceptionally expensive when new. They were quite similar, quite honestly. A new 300S Coupe at the time was like 14 grand, 12, 14 grand, which that was a lot of money in 1953. And consequently, it was a technologically special car and also made of, high quality woods and leathers and whatnot. So it was expensive to keep looking nice. Doesn't mean that they all fell into disrepair. They certainly were more desirable and kept in better nick than, say, an Adenauer, which was sort of the sedan version of that was related to this car. But because of the sheer cost of keeping them looking so nice, there are some that sort of suffered from lack of attention. And nowadays, to restore one, you're looking down the barrel of a high six-figure gun.
Yeah. All right, Eric, what's your next choice?
So, given where we're located this year up at the track, we've got some pretty special race cars that we're going to be offering. Two of them that I'd like to mention. The first is a Lola-Ford. It's a pretty neat thing. 1966 Lola-Ford T70 Mark II Can-Am sports racer. The T70 being one of the, most iconic sports racing cars. This is the open top one, which is really just a beautiful looking machine. And it was driven by the great Dan Gurney, erstwhile presidential candidate. Gurney scored a win in this during the second round of the 67 Can-Am Championship Series at Bridgehampton, the late great track there. And it was the only Ford-powered victory in the original 9-year tenure of the Anything Goes Can-Am Championship Series. But this car is powered by a small block 305 cubic inch V8 going through a Hewland transaxle. It's modified rear cockpit bulkhead, modified to accommodate the rather lengthy Dan Gurney. We all know the Gurney bump on the Ford GT. They had to change this car too to make way for his physique. But it's been really nicely presented and is liveried as it was at that time. The other car that's a pretty special machine, and on that the Lola-Ford's going to be offered there with an estimate of 1.1 million to 1.5 million. The other car that we've got coming across is a 1967 Volstead Ford 67B Indy car. This one was driven by none other than Jim Clark, who, of course, was the great Scottish driver, double Formula One championship, world champion, and he also won the 1967 Indy 500 race. So Jim Clark actually drove quite a few Indy cars, and he mostly drove Lotus-built ones during his career, both at Indy and Formula One. But this car, in 1967, he piloted it at the Ray Mays 300 road race in Riverside, California. So it's got some pretty special history there. It's got not a lot of car, but it's got 500 horsepower from a 4.2 liter 4-cam V8. So what little it has in terms of weight and bodywork, it makes up for in its enormous amount of horsepower. And it was campaigned by constructor Rolla Volstead. So pretty neat thing. It's a car you can do a lot with. It's a very powerful, very fast car. Both of these cars would be welcome entrants into the reunion for 2027, since you won't be racing it at the same weekend you buy it, I imagine. But maybe that's up to you if you want to try that. But we're really excited to offer that. That Volstead's going to be offered at $750,000 to $1.25 million and no reserve.
It's a very attractive Indy car. Yellow with wonderful sponsor stickers all over it. Number 21 roundel in black with white digits. And probably the most prominent feature, which race fans love, is that bundle of snakes exhaust. I mean,
yes, the exhaust is pretty fabulous poking out. And it's an early wing car too. So it's got a rear spoiler. These were obviously just coming into prominence in the mid-'60s.
And the spoiler is autographed by Jim Clark.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, fantastic.
What more could you want?
What more could you want? But if you wanted more, Other drivers included Gordon Johncock, Tom Sneva, George Fulmer, Chris Amon.
Mm-hmm.
So a murderer's row of former users.
Yeah, so there are obviously plenty of great names in it, and an opportunity to add one's prestigious name to that list.
All right, I'm going to bring us back to the pre-war era now with a 1936 Cord experimental cabriolet. Now, this was one of at least two prototypes, I think, that Cord was experimenting with. And you just had an auction in Reno recently where you sold the Berlin version of this car. Is that right?
Yeah, so we had our National Automobile Museum auction where we de-accessed just under 90 cars from the National Automobile Museum in Reno, Nevada, the vast majority of which came directly from the Harrah's collection, including that Cord. And that car had been acquired directly from the family of E.L. Cord in the 60s as a project and restored by Harrah's team. It was given a Gold Star restoration, which was the highest level of restoration that Harrah's shop would do on the cars that they had come through there. It was a pretty special car. This was at the very tail end of Cord's existence. The Cord Empire, Auburn, Cord, Duesenberg. These cars were created based on a Cord 812, hence being a Cord experimental, but they were essentially created to be the next Duesenberg model. The Model J, while truly a legendary machine, we sometimes forget that by 1936, it had been in production for 8 years, largely unchanged. Obviously, bodywork had developed over time and modernized with the changes in taste and whatnot. But mechanically speaking, aside from very minor changes and an early change in the transmission from a 4-speed to a 3-speed, mechanically it was the same 420 cubic inch straight 8 double overhead cam, occasionally offered with a supercharger. Not a terrible motor by any stretch. It was and continues to be one of the most incredible motors ever designed. But it's a big motor, and they wanted to modernize and come up with something new, and that was going to be this model. Of course, Cord ceased to be a going concern very shortly thereafter. The only thing that really exists of Cord today is the company that built the motors, Lycoming.
Right.
Of course, still exists today as an airplane motor manufacturer. But so this Cord that we offered the Berlin, which had been restored as a limousine, pretty special machine, very big machine. The one we're going to be offering, all of these experimentals, and there were several of them built in different body styles. This is the Cabriolet. They were all bodied by LeBaron. It's a full disappearing top Cabriolet. It's restored in what's understood to be the original colors, which is a red over tan. It's a 2-seat Cabriolet with a trunk, no rumble seats. So really pretty sporty looking coachwork. It's got that interesting front end with the tall, narrow grille, somewhat reminiscent of a LaSalle, disappearing headlights, and the unique sort of hashtag hood ornament, which was unique to these Cord experimentals. Under the hood is the same motor as Cord 812, so it's the supercharged V8 running through a pre-selector gearbox. The interior, obviously, very very nice with leather. The interior has paint matched parts of it that match the exterior, and to have a full disappearing top in the mid 30s is relatively uncommon, and there's always been a big premium for a car that has a fully disappearing top.
You mentioned that pre-selector gearbox, which is a kind of a funny, I guess, transitional piece of technology. It's not a manual, it's not an automatic. It's kind of like you shift into first gear using your clutch pedal, and then thereafter you just move the lever, right?
So not really. Most pre-selectors, Coattail, as well as the pre-selector in Cords, which was made by a company called Bendix, essentially it's a vacuum-powered transmission mechanism where your gear was pre-selected using a switch gear. In a coattail, it looked kind of like nearly a half a plate with a lever along the side of the steering wheel that would move up and down to shift through the gears. On a cord, it looks like a little teeny gated shifter. What would essentially happen is you would select the gear you want, and then when you wanted to actually shift, whether up or down, didn't matter, nothing would happen until you pressed the clutch. And the clutch was the activator for that the vacuum-assisted hydraulic pump that would then push the car into the next gear. In Cotel's instance, the reason that was used was, especially on French racing cars, was because you had moved the transmission from the floor with a lever that you had to take your hand all the way off the steering wheel and move it down to shift, to a place where you could shift with your finger, keeping both hands on the steering wheel the entire time. The other advantage was you didn't have to move your hand when you wanted to shift. So if you wanted to come out of a turn in a lower gear, you could put that car into the lower gear, pre-selecting it, prior to actually needing it, and not shifting until you were in a position where you wanted to actually shift, but you might not have the steering wheel fully straight, or if you want to still have both hands on the steering wheel. So that's why they did it in a lot of French race cars. In the Cord's instance, the primary reason they did it was simple mechanics. A front-engine car, there's a front-wheel drive car. So the transmission was no longer behind the engine as it would be normally. The transmission was in front of the engine. In order to facilitate this, in the L29 and also on like Citroën Deux Chevaux, you had kind of a plunger-like shifter that stuck out of the center of the dash, and it would go in and out and move back and forth. And then you had a long linkage. If you ever look at under the hood of an L29, there's a rod that goes all the way across the top of the car and has to have all these bends in it to get around the various things on top of the motor. And obviously the rod is subject to bending and tension and wear. If you get rid of all of the mechanical connection and instead just have what amounts to an electric switch, which is what a pre-selector is, then you don't have to have anything but wires that go up to the front shifter, which is again that Bendix pre-selector hydraulic vacuum assisted pump, to shift the car. So it got rid of a lot of the mechanical details that made it so you could package things a bit better. So that was the reason why the 810 and 812 had that pre-selector gearbox.
Very interesting technological advancement. Of course, we're still in the coach building era, but it's starting to wane. But as you say, this was a LeBaron body.
Yeah, so this was a LeBaron body coach-built machine. These cars architecturally were still body on frame. Monocoque existed. Lancia had debuted that a decade prior on the Lambda. But for the most part, cars were still body on frame, which made coach building relatively easy. That being said, coach building was very expensive, so you didn't see it much on anything but luxury cars. Rolls-Royces, at the time, you would have been looking at a Phantom 3. Those were still coach-built cars. So, this was an interesting machine at the tail end of things for Cord, certainly. You had pretty aerodynamic Cadillac V16s and things like that at this era as well. But this Cord, it's got a well-documented, known history throughout its life. It was Concours restored finished in 2021, but it's never been shown. So the next owner would certainly have the opportunity to show it and kind of enjoy all the pride and glory of winning whatever pots and medals it might win without having to go through the brain damage of restoring it. And it's going to be offered at $650 to $850 and without reserve.
Well, it's lovely and unique. It's got that beautiful streamlining. I think they did an elegant job with the hidden pop-up headlights and the fenders. They look good up or down. And of course, it's got a golf club door, which is exactly what you need in a car like this.
Absolutely. It's actually got a very spacious trunk back there. And the 810 was the first production car with pop-up headlights. So it was aping that fantastic Gordon Bierig design.
Wonderful. All right, Eric, what do you have for us next?
Well, next up is another interesting car going to the post-war era. It's a 1968 Maserati Ghibli. Lovely machine, big V8 power, sport coupe from the Trident brand. What's interesting about this particular car is it belonged to a certain magazine publisher who was photographed in front of his mansion with one of his girlfriends.
Are we talking about Larry Flint?
No, we're talking about the one who published a magazine you read for articles, Hugh Hefner.
I knew it was one of the two.
Yeah, this was Hugh Hefner's car. So there's a picture of him in front of the mansion with it. So a pretty unique and special machine. We're really looking forward to actually offering this because the provenance really sets it apart. There's any car with celebrity provenance is pretty special, and without being too inelegant, you can only imagine who sat in the seats. So. It's 4.7. It's not an SS, so it's not going to light the heather as far as being a 4.9 SS convertible. But classic sort of red black, elegant machine. It's a great value, especially relative to a Daytona, which it will perform handily against. The big thing with this though is it's a nicely presented car, and it's got a phenomenal ownership history, and you've got the pictures to prove it.
I love the Ghibli. I think it's underrated as a classic. Fantastic wedgie shape.
Yeah, it is a very elegant 1970s wedge, and we were seeing a lot of wedges from all the manufacturers. If you look at the Daytona, the Lamborghini Acelero, we were getting much more angular designs. This Maserati has always been, I think, just a really beautiful, fast touring machine. Plenty of power from that big 4.7 liter twin cam V8. They're really enjoyable things to drive. They have a great sound to them. And Maserati as a brand, I think, is a very approachable brand that you can get a huge amount of bang for your buck.
I love the long hood. Of course, this is a Giugiaro design. So, he and Marcello Gandini were sort of the kings of Italian design at that point. So, yeah, marvelous car.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk motorsports again. And this 56 Lotus 11 Le Mans. One of 150 or so Series 1s that were delivered to the U.S. in Le Mans spec, and aluminum body, Coventry Climax engine, which was a giant killer, was it not?
Oh, yeah. These are they look like what you want a 1950s race car to look like. We say one of approximately, since Lotus record keeping is
spotty at best.
Not the best from the factory, I should say. And if you've ever seen a Dead Nuts original Lotus build plate, it looks like the chassis number was written on there towards the end of the day after a few pints at the pub using a early Dremel tool. But obviously the 11 has very voluptuous bodywork. The late great Alain de Cadenet, I remember, used to always I guess this in today's touchy day and age may not have aged well, but I think it's quite funny. He used to describe women's bodies using various Lotus model numbers.
Apropos.
The 11 would have been a very curvy machine here. One of the last cars with aluminum bodywork before you went to fiberglass. This one has been successfully campaigned in lots of historic racing events, including 6 runnings at the Rolex Monterey Motorsports Reunion, where it's going to be sold. And it's about as close to turnkey as you can imagine. It comes from a very active and well-known participant. It's got its HMSA and VSCCA logbooks and historical technical passport. So it's really a special thing. It's got the Coventry Climax FWB engine in it, which is the larger and more powerful of the 2 principal power plants that you can get in this the 11. Freshly rebuilt by Mark experts, Marco Vici, Wentz Engineering, and it's only been used for a single race weekend since the rebuild. So it's a pretty nice thing, and one that you could take out primarily race, but if you wanted to show it, the 11s are just absolutely beautiful. cars.
They are, and I think they're every bit as sexy as a D-type Jaguar. They have some of the same lines. The driver's fairing, which juts out from the seat back, just like in the D-type Jaguar. And the designer of the 11 was a guy named Frank Costin, who had been an aerodynamicist at de Havilland Aircraft Company. And then I think Lotus hired him away from there. And it's a very futuristic shape for 1956.
Yeah.
And has been very successful in racing its entire existence. So
yeah, I mean, they look fast. Costin obviously also went on to design listers as well, which you can sort of see the design architecture carried on, albeit in a
bigger scale,
stockier form.
Yeah.
Wrapped around either a big straight six or V8. But these were pretty lithe machines, again, towards the end of Lotus putting the engine in the front, and certainly at the end of Lotus having aluminum bodywork. So they're lovely vehicles, and they just look so beautiful, just standing still, to say nothing of how successful they are on the track.
All right, Eric, what is your next pick from the Laguna Seca auction?
Well, I mean, if we're going to continue on the motorsport lilt, there's another pretty historic racer, which is the '63 Jaguar E-Type. There's a XK competition coupe number 46. This was formerly owned by a gentleman we might have heard of, Nick Cage. Currently in, I guess, Spyder Noir is his current thing, the film noir version of Spider-Man. But it was developed and campaigned by Jaguar specialist Bernard Juchli, who is now and has been for many years Jay Leno's chief mechanic, taking care of his special collection there.
By the way, Bernard owned a garage just south of Silicon Valley, and Jay would send stuff up to him. And eventually Jay said, "Come work for me." And Bernard said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "No, just close your shop and come work for me full time." And the rest is history. They had been together for many, many years.
Yeah, I mean, he had Jaguars Unlimited was his shop. So he knew what he was doing when he built this car. Stripped it out to the bare shell, rebuilt it. It was successfully raced. It's 3.8 liter, 365 horsepower at 6,500 RPM on a dynamometer. It's quite a lot of power for Jaguar Straight Six, and it was a quite successful racing car in the Vara B Production Championship in the early 90s. It's continued to be well kept, well maintained, and is certainly a machine you could enter into any number of great historic motorsport events.
And of course, the car is just shimmering in British racing green. This is the shape that Enzo Ferrari famously said was the most beautiful car ever produced.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You just can't go wrong with an E-Type, can you?
No, they're pretty fabulous machines on road or on track, successful in both places. They look great, spectacular value. A lot of car for the money. This one's going to be $175,000 to $225,000 in no reserve, so couldn't go wrong with something like that.
Eric, what's your feeling on no reserve versus reserve in the auction setting?
Well, you can look at it one of two ways. Reserves are great to protect you against the eventuality that there is no market. The reality is there is a market. And reserves are something that sellers always want, and I totally appreciate why. It's belt and braces. But whenever people are buying, they don't want reserves. They want to buy without reserve. And the reason they want to buy without reserve is because they want to bid against the market. Nothing gives someone more confidence in the reality of what the value of something is than knowing that you are only bidding against other warm bodies and other people who want to own that car and not necessarily against the seller's expectations. So, no reserve is a very helpful tool for selling the vast majority of cars. Not everything. There are cars that really should have reserves, but most cars, there is a welcome market, and the market will come, especially when it's presented in the right venue, being marketed to the right people, and where you've got a team like the Bonhams team that knows who is out there that is playing at these and wanting these sorts of things, reaching out to them to get them lined up to want to participate. So, no reserve, it's funny. Sellers typically look at results and want those results. which is 100% fair. And I would always want to achieve those results. What sellers rarely look at is how those results were achieved. And those results are achieved by, at the very, 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 very heart of it, two things: estimate and reserve. You can do everything in the world to promote something and put it in the best place with the best photography and the most marketing, but if the estimate and the reserve are wrong, it's not going to sell. A good example of this was last year when we had the Future Classics collection, which was a bunch of modern hypercars, Bugattis, Paganis, Koenigsegg, stuff like that. These were cars that had, in many instances, never been offered. The models had not been offered publicly without reserves. Some cases, they'd never been offered publicly at all. And whenever they were offered privately, they're always offered with a POA asking price, which is to say it's a very opaque market. At the end of the day, pretty much everything sold well within, if not over, its estimate, which speaks to the reality that the no reserve feature was what drove a lot of the bidding on those. People were showing up to bid on them because they knew that those were selling, and they were only going to be bidding against the natural market. They weren't going to be bidding against expectations. So buyers absolutely love no reserve. And there's a number of sellers that acknowledge and realize this, and they're the ones that, in the vast majority of instances, are realizing the fruits of that risk. Look, life has always got risk. If you offer a car without reserve, yes, there is the risk it may sell for less than you're hoping. But if you offer a car with reserve, there's also the risk that it will not sell, and then create a sort of a data point for what the car is potentially not worth. When selling cars, no reserve just acts as a huge marketing benefit to buyers to get them to the fore and get them to bid, because they know that the car is going to sell. And at the end of the day, they're going to show up with the hope and the dream that they're going to get a deal. And the reality is the deals don't always happen. Usually, in pretty much every instance, the car gets bid up to what it's worth, if not sometimes beyond what it's worth. It's pretty rare that a car sells for less than the market value, quite frankly. Especially a lot of these cars, with modern cars, there's increasingly more and more of them. Even a limited rare machine, there's several hundred of them that were built. We're not talking about a coach-built machine. The Cord experimental we sold in Reno, that was sold out reserve. Everything there was sold out of reserve. And that was a market that people, I think a lot of folks going into it, the vast majority of that collection was pre-World War II. Most of it was pre-1930. Most people were thinking, who is going to buy this stuff? Did some of it sell under its estimate? Yes. Did some of it sell above its estimate? Oh, yeah. Taken on the whole, it sold well within its estimate towards the upper end of things. So that is to say, no reserve works.
Yeah, from my perspective, and having sold cars at auction with a reserve and without a reserve, I really like the no reserve model. It's nerve-wracking for the seller, but I think it's the way to go in a lot of instances. So interesting to hear your perspective on it.
Yep. Same position. I have, when I've sold cars, I have sold it without reserve. I practice what I preach.
Yeah, and I kind of like to see what it's going to do. All right, my friend, let's talk about this 1961 Morgan Plus 4 Super Sports. Morgan, of course, famous for hand building their cars in a diminutive factory, lots of wooden framing in the cars. You order your car and maybe 5 years later you get your car. They were in many ways kind of resisting the 20th century.
Well, you could say that. On the same note, at the end of the day, wood framing, and we should preface this by saying the bodywork was wood framed.
Right.
It's not to say that it has a wooden frame. Franklin had ash wood frames, like the actual frame of the car was made with two large, long pieces of lumber into the 20s. Now, that is not what this car has. This car has a steel frame, but the bodywork was framed in a pre-war sort of technique with wood. if you think about it, wood is a phenomenal material. It is light, it is flexible, it can be made pretty rot resistant if it's treated properly. It is relatively heat resistant, and it's actually a really wonderful thing to work with. From a vague aside, it also made the car very slightly safer since it created something akin to a crumple zone, since wood is much more willing to bend and break than metal is. Not that that was the reason they chose to do it. The Super Sport was, for the Morgan Plus 4, which was the model at the time. The Plus 8 didn't exist yet. The Plus 4 was Super Sport. I don't think it takes a rocket surgeon to figure out this was the performance model. They were quite successful in racing. They raced in Europe and the US, and they raced at Daytona even. Most of them were right-hand drive for the home market. This one is a left-hand drive example that was delivered new to, I think, Canada. It's a 61, so it's a pretty early car in the production of super sports, which went on until the late 60s. It's a nicely presented machine. You can do a lot with it. You can certainly take it on tours. It's a road registered legal car. We just sold one of these in our Greenwich auction on the end of May. There's plenty of folks that love these machines. Morgans have a great following. So besides all the tours you can do with it, you could also certainly race it in any number of events. And as a 1960s sports racer, it's actually quite capable. I mean, Morgans are kind of like a Porsche. They're momentum cars. If you can get them up to speed, they will maintain that speed. So really a nice machine. It's got all the trappings of a race car as far as safety is concerned from the era, which means it's got a roll bar. Since the windshield will not support any weight. A neat machine and one that can be enjoyed in any number of ways.
The quintessential little British sports car, right? And this one has quite a flashy livery with a silver bodywork and black fenders.
Yeah.
A beautiful amber lensed Lucas fog lamp on the front bumper.
Mm-hmm.
A few cute grill badges.
Wouldn't be an English car without some grill badges. You got to have grill badges.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Aluminum cylinder head on this. It's been lightly tuned for performance driving, but bigger air cleaners on it, steel belted hoses and things of that nature. But at the heart of it, it's a very nicely presented machine that you can certainly tour, drive, and enjoy.
Absolutely. All right, my friend, what do you have next?
Next up, I think we'll swing back and forth from old to new. On the older front, two interesting older cars, and then I'll go with two interesting, more modern racing things. The older things would be a 1903 Thomas Model 18, I think the second oldest Thomas in existence. Thomas being one of the premier American auto manufacturers. It's a London to Brighton, eligible car. I think it needs to be dated, but it would have no problem getting dated. It's very well-known history on this car. It's got rear entry bodywork on it, so you can take the whole family, especially since it's a Model 18, so it's got plenty of power to get up the hills. We had it on display at our auction in Reno. Nicely presented, nicely restored machine. It's well known in Thomas circles, so it'd be a great opportunity to acquire an early American vehicle, Thomas being one of the most legendary early American manufacturers. They built incredibly powerful luxury sports cars in that early brass era, and one of them quite famously drove around the world from New York to Paris. And then another early car with what today is considered a modern drivetrain is a 1916 Roush & Lang BX6 Brougham. Roush & Lang was one of the premier electric car manufacturers. They were one of the first manufacturers to put a steering wheel in an electric car. This one has a tiller in it, but these are really classic machines. There are certainly events you can do with them. I would quite fancy one, since where I live in San Antonio, you could just drive it around on most of the streets here where the speed limit isn't that high, and they'll get about 60 miles of range on a single charge, so more than enough to get most of the places you're going to be going in town at 25 miles an hour. Nicely appointed interior, sunshades if you wish to have privacy. But a really elegant, lovely electric thing. I haven't seen anyone update one of these to be able to be charged at a Tesla supercharger or Electrify America charger, but I think it'd be pretty funny if someone did that. It reminds folks that to some degree there are no new ideas. They've all been done before. Electric cars obviously date from the dawn of motoring. By 1916, they were kind of on the out now. The electric starter had made gas cars a better option. They were quicker, they had longer range, and they no longer were hampered by a difficult starting procedure. It's still a really neat machine. There's a pretty strong cadre of electric car collectors. And of course, if you are touring with cars from this era, it'll have more than enough grunt and get up and go to keep up with pretty much anyone else.
People say that electric cars aren't interesting or necessarily exciting, but seeing a car of this era moving under electric power silently is really a neat experience.
It is. I mean, they're pretty interesting to drive, not the least of which because you're steering with a tiller. They don't really have a rheostat to control the throttle. It clicks into various speeds. Some cars had a lever, some cars had an additional tiller. They pretty rarely had a throttle pedal, if you will. Or sometimes they had a grip, twist grip. You typically drive them with two hands, one hand on the tiller, the other hand operating the throttle grip, as in this car. But yeah, they make no noise. They were very popular and marketed towards women. So you have a lot of them. They have sort of a sitting room kind of layout on the inside where you have a wide bench and then sometimes one or two occasional chairs facing the driver. And they will typically have shades on all of the windows, so you could pull them down for privacy while remaining in the car. And of course, they were very quiet, vibration free, and there was no dirty gasoline or oil. So for a well-to-do woman of the era, that would have been your car of choice. And bearing in mind there weren't really highways at that time. You mostly had, if you were lucky, you had brick paved roads, or in some cities you had tar dipped wooden blocks. Usually you'd have dirt or mud. And these are very capable machines, again, plenty of power, and they're pretty easy to keep up and maintain, because at the end of the day they've got an electric engine that's looks like a big barrel sitting in the rear wheels there and along the rear axle. And then the battery pack, and all the batteries have been replaced. You don't run them with the lead acid batteries they had originally. Most of them are running a series of golf cart or car batteries in parallel.
There you go. A silent salon in which to motor about.
Exactly. Perfect for picking the kids up from school.
All right, we've got to talk about this Picchio SRP2, which is something that I had never heard of until I looked at your auction catalog. And it's a Italian-built sports racing prototype, and built in 2002. And tell me about this thing. It's very interesting.
Sure. So Picchio was founded in '89 with contributions by Giotto Bizzarini, who of course had his own eponymous manufacturer, but also helped design the Ferrari 250 GTO. It was a pretty successful European sports racer. While Italian in design, it relied on reliable BMW power. So it has a BMW 3-liter straight six, so venerable double overcan motor in there. They competed pretty successfully in the early 2000s, which, whether we like it or not, is quickly becoming vintage racing. So I think it's harder and harder when you start remembering the racing cars that you think aren't that old, and then you find out that now they're vintage racing cars. So, these were competing. This one specifically competed in Rolex Grand Am, so it was in the United States competing when new in 2002, 2003. It was driven by some pretty well-known drivers, including Andy Lally and Darren Law. It was restored in 2013. You can do an increasing number of things with it, given the fact that it's got, BMW power. The motor is very easy to maintain. Mechanically, it's got a Hewland 5-speed, so that's pretty indestructible. But it's something you can keep on the road. One of the problems with some of these more modern sports racing cars is they are technologically marvelous, but technologically difficult to maintain. It's one of the reasons you don't see very many people racing like Indy kart cars from the 90s and early 2000s, because it's F1 technology in a $50,000 car. So every time you take it out, it's $10,000 or $20,000 to run it for the weekend. This is a much more approachable thing, but hugely powerful, very fast, a really enjoyable machine to run around.
Yeah, and it's got carbon fiber bodywork, and it has this marvelous front clip, which, if I can describe it, from the very front leading edge of the front clip, the hood, if you will, slopes dramatically up to the cowling area, but then the front fenders have this swooping bridge of carbon fiber. So it's essentially tunneled in front. And I have to imagine that provides quite a bit of downforce. It's kind of like a front spoiler.
Yeah, it's front wing.
Yeah, front wing.
Front airfoil.
Front airfoil. There you go.
There's no question as to from what country this came.
No
Only
doubt.
the Italians would make a tool so beautiful. The Germans would have filled that in and put an airfoil on the bottom that was adjustable or something boring, which would have been highly effective but not as sexy. This thing looks really cool, and that front end is pretty wild looking. It helps that the engine's in the middle, so you are given the opportunity to have a wilder front end. And I mean, it's not the only BMW powered thing we have. Another really special BMW that is a BMW that we have in the sale is a 2000 PTG BMW E46 M3. This was one of the earliest E46 M3 racers, and it was used to start the second phase of the PTG M3 racing program. It's chassis number 00/001, so it doesn't get much earlier than that. Some of the folks that drove it, Hans Stuck, who we all know pretty well, Boris Said and Johannes van Overbeek, raced successfully. It was displayed at a Hans Stuck tribute at the Quail in 2009. And it was prepared in period to dominate American GT racing, and it's been well kept since. Coming from a very good home, it's well familiar with these machines. So it's a car that you could, again, enjoy the more modern era of vintage racing that's becoming more and more popular.
Yes, highly aggressive bodywork, just a sweet spot in M3 history. I hope that we see this one back on the track once it finds its new owner.
Yeah, I think we will. It's definitely a weapon, and it's ready for someone else to take it out and go to battle with it.
All right, Eric. Well, we kind of swept through. Of course, there's going to be more available as we get closer to the auction.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have plenty more available on August the 13th, Thursday, August the 13th. Sale starts at 10 a.m. We've got preview on Tuesday and Wednesday. Tuesday is an open day; anyone can come up. Wednesday, there obviously the reunion is a ticketed event. So Wednesday and Thursday, you'll need a ticket to the track to come up, which you'd probably want anyways because the racing is pretty fantastic. Practice of qualifying those days. So we certainly look forward to having people come up and see us, and coming by to see the preview, see the cars, and see us out in Monterey. And if they can't make it out, obviously bonhamscars.com/Laguna.
Always a pleasure to have you on the show, my friend. I enjoy our conversations. Eric Minoff, Vice President, Head of Department in the U.S. for Bonhams Cars.
Always a pleasure. It's great seeing you.
I'll see you in Monterey.
See you there. Travel safe.
That's all for this episode of Horsepower Heritage. Don't forget the Instagram and the YouTube channel. And if you enjoy the show, leave me 5 stars and a quick review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Finally, don't forget to support at buymeacoffee.com/HB Heritage. Throw a few bucks in the gas tank. And until next time, I'm Maurice Merrick. Thanks for listening.